he stayed so calm, but I know there had to be moments where that was just terrifying because we had been holding on to this being the end result was a transplant that would give us more time when things did get their worst. When we thought that might be off the table, it was hard to consider that possibility.
Trying to balance that, the honesty of this is really scary with, but I really don't think this is the end. And I'm trusting God that this is not the end. There's definitely a back and forth.
Yep. I didn't feel like that was going to be the last time I was going to see him. I didn't feel like we had complications ahead, you know. Told him I loved him and did all that I could and should do if it was. But I felt pretty confident that he'd be coming back out and be in a better spot.
But of course, it's not a choice you would ever make to take that from someone else for your benefit. You know, we're super grateful, and I'm so glad that we're in the position we are after someone else's loss.
And the next morning, when they allowed me to go in to see him, she said, "Would you like to hear his new lungs?" And I said, "Yes, I would." And the difference was indescribable, just so clear. And it just made the gift even more real to be able to hear that. And just so grateful.
I need to let all of y'all know, if y'all don't know this, Colleen knows, but you three, your father picks on me mercilessly.
Yeah,
we've heard.
And then he welcomes me in his office to counsel me. So it's kind of like
Same here.
tearing me down and then building me up with counseling. But
Quite the business model.
there you go.
all right. So for our listeners who cannot see y'all, let's actually try to help everyone familiarize themselves with y'all's voices. So we'll start with Colleen. Go ahead and introduce yourself for people who may not even know who you are. You know, we got a lot of listeners here, so go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Colleen, and I'm Chuck's wife, and we've been married almost 49 years now.
49, wow.
We've been on this journey.
That's so cool. That's cool. All right, moving on to Brian.
Hey, I'm Brian. I am the favorite of the three.
I knew
me and
it.
my wife,
I knew it.
me and my wife, Crystal, been married for, 11 years.
Gotcha.
This year will be 11 years. And we have our 9-year-old, Felix, is our one and only.
All right, tell me the order of you guys as far as
I
age.
am the baby.
Okay.
You want me to tell you my
Clearly.
age, birthday?
No, I'd love it. I'd love to hear your age. How old are you?
I'm 41.
41. Okay.
And the baby, no less.
Yeah. I've got you by 6 years, so I'm 47.
Yeah, I'm old.
Yeah. Colleen, you want to tell yours?
71. No shame.
There you
He's
go.
just throwing us all under the bus because obviously the rest of us are older than him.
Exactly.
okay.
Exactly.
All right. Ruth, how much older are you than me?
Than you? How old did you say you are?
I'm 47.
Oh, actually, I'm not. I'm about to be 45. I'm the middle. I'm in Texas, and I've been married for almost 10 years to Brady, and then we have 4 kids ranging from 20 to 5.
Dang, 20. Okay. I say dang like that, but I've got an 18-year-old.
That's right.
Wow, 20. Oh, my gosh. Oh, yeah, 18. Yeah.
Oh.
All right, Nicole. So the oldest child. Are you older than me?
Nope, I think we're in the same club. 77?
Yeah, 77, August 15th. How about you?
August 9th.
Wow. Nice.
Oh.
Wow.
Very cool.
Within a week.
There you
Yeah. So I'm the oldest, and I would say I'm the favorite, Brian, but we'll just go with most responsible.
And
You win.
you are in
Touché.
France, right?
Yes, I'm in France. We moved here for my job about 8 years ago almost. And my husband and I have been married 19 years almost, if I'm doing the math right. And we've got 2 girls as well. They're 15 and 12.
Nice. What time is it over there?
It is just after 9.
Okay. All right. For our listeners, it's 3:00 in the afternoon here on the East Coast. So, well, y'all's Christmas was a different kind of Christmas. I am curious before we get into some details about Chip's journey from y'all's vantage point and what it was like to see your your dad and your husband suffer in the way that he suffered, and at the same time, just so much to celebrate. But what was Christmas like? It was all in the hospital for the most part. Did y'all celebrate afterwards? Tell me about it, Colleen.
Well, all of the kids were here. Some of the spouses made the sacrifice to stay behind and keep things running at home in Texas and France. But Crystal was with us and little Felix. But we were in the hospital. Nicole and Ruth came in and they stayed at our condo and did lots of cooking and shuttling back and forth, and Brian bringing in meals and hanging out with us. It was definitely a different Christmas, but it was a Christmas miracle.
That's cool. What day did the actual transplant happen? When was the transplant?
December 20th. We got
20th.
the call on the 19th, and the actual transplant occurred on the 20th.
On the 20th. Gotcha.
I'm just going to jump in for a second and say, you know what? I am a typical middle child. I was just forgotten about again.
I know.
Because I was actually not there on Christmas Day.
Ruth flew home on Christmas Eve and came back the day after Christmas. But Brady stayed back for you to come the rest of the time.
I had all my kids here. No, she didn't.
For most of the time, I did, Ruth. Oh, my gosh.
I'm just giving you a hard time.
I was just waiting.
I would love to hear all of y'all's perspectives of all of these questions, but I also just want it to be a fluid conversation where everybody feels welcome to jump in and not necessarily have to answer. But, there's a lot of people listening that care about Chip, and I just thought it would be... Chip texted me a couple hours ago and said, hey, should I join at the end? And I was like, let's just hear from your family, and then, because I want to, hear Chip's perspective probably next week. So what has been the journey for you guys, like personally? And I would say even going back to when his health just took a really bad turn for the worse, like in the last year. I mean, obviously you guys have known about the diagnosis for a super long time, but just seeing your dad suffer in that capacity and then take us on up to current day, just how has it been like for his kids and his wife?
Sure, I'll jump in. Be the favorite.
Okay.
I'm a surrealist myself. I kind of determined that when my grandfather passed away many, probably 25 plus years ago. Vance, my mom's dad. Things just don't really settle in as fast. It takes me a very long time to wrap my brain around it. Even something as serious as death. So for this to have come up and be as serious as it was, not to get ahead of myself by any means, but I think, there's a fear that takes over immediately. And, you kind of hope that dissipates and you come out the other side and go through the rest of the emotions, which, I call it the surrealist, call it, God give me a little break on the fear part because could use it. I was able to come out and, once you get on the list around Thanksgiving-ish, I think is when all the fear kind of went away. I'm like, this is back up against the wall. This is the only way you got to go. So this is where we have to do it. Let's go.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm assuming you three. I don't want to make any assumptions. I think you guys all share similar faith, like as far as Christian faith, like belief in God and all that. Were you, Brian, did you feel like your heart was aligned with what Chip and Colleen were saying, that hey, we don't feel like this is the end of the road. We feel like God has, like, were you taking that in, or was it like, that's y'all's faith, I hope you're right, sort of thing?
I mean, you probably it's not to the latter, right? I would say that my Christianity path has been different for sure, but that's for a way another podcast. I still have faith, hope, all of these things. So yes, I had faith that things were going to work out and knew that they would, I had the same faith based that, of course, God wasn't done with them yet. And we got to keep him here on the earth for a little while longer. But yeah, so I guess to answer your question, probably somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anybody else want to speak into that personally from your perspective? I'd love to hear it.
I would have to confess that I experienced faith and fear through this whole process. Um, when things started to take a dive, I mean, this whole several years have been an emotional roller coaster for us. And there were days when I felt like my faith was strong and everything's going to work out. And then there were days I was scared out of my mind. You know, there were times that even when we would pray, Chip would say, I feel like God's told me it's going to be all right. And he was very confident and assured, but he said, I feel like it's going to get worse before it gets better. And it did. So I have prayed lots of prayers in faith through this process, but I've also prayed some serious begging prayers. And no shame, there were times when he would say, are you begging or believing? And I unashamedly doing both. I was covering all my bases because I was desperate.
That's crazy that now I'm like, man, maybe Chip really is close to God. He knew that it was going to get worse first. Wow. Nicole?
I'm somewhere probably, I don't know that I would even say in between. I think we all had our own separate experiences with the whole thing probably. And I process things differently. We all do. I tend to immediately start doing research, and you prompted us with some questions to reflect on, and you asked, one of the questions you asked was if we tend to be a worst case scenario thinker. I am definitely a worst case scenario. Like, I immediately have to make myself walk down that path and then come back from it. But that's how I process. Okay, if the worst happens, how do we prepare? What can we do to prolong, to minimize regret, to all the things? And then I also, and this is probably more recent, that I'm also making myself say, okay, but that's not the only outcome that could happen. Like, now let's think through the other potential outcomes. And so many people do have positive stories with this diagnosis and experience, but the first things you read are scary. I got the feeling I was maybe in the minority of people reading in our family about the diagnosis. So I kept quiet on a few things that I think Dad realized that I had discovered. And it looked early on like a transplant could be an option, which I think there was some discounting of in the beginning because of age and other things, but it looks early like that could be. And I just kind of, I don't know, I always felt like that could be a possibility. And even when we got to the point just before when there was the possibility of him being disqualified, that was hard. I mean, I can't even imagine for you, Mom and Dad. I mean, he stayed so calm to us, but I know there had to be moments where that was just terrifying because we had been holding on to this being the end result was a transplant that would give us more time when things did get their worst. And when we thought that might be off the table, it was hard to consider that possibility. But even then, I don't know. I just never felt like that was how this was going to end, and I don't think Dad did either. And that I would have moments of being fearful, but more moments of just not believing that's how this was going to end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Ruth, you still with us? I know you were wanting to answer initially.
I mean, I'm probably saying a lot of what they are saying, and I think that it helped a lot to see Dad really confident and for him to be very resolved, and that this was not, that death was not the answer. I mean, he shared on the podcast about remaining confident of this. You will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living, and that was a lifeline for me in my prayers, and just seeing how Dad was feeling very confident. And I don't read a lot, and there was a time when he first told us that there was something, but he didn't tell us what it was. And he said, the name of the diagnosis is unimportant. Just don't Google it. And well, of course, one of us immediately Googled it. And I guarantee you, I have yet to Google it. I think I leaned heavily too on Nicole's tendency to research things. I would look to her and go, okay, how freaked out should I be right now? Like, how bad is this? I mean, even with the biopsy and how scary that was, it was, okay, is Nicole freaking out? Like, she's read, she's looked at all the research. Like, how is she feeling about this? But trying to balance that, the honesty of this is really scary with, but I really don't think this is the end. And I'm trusting God that this is not the end. It was
Mm-hmm.
definitely a
Mm-hmm.
back and forth.
Yep. So how did it happen? So when was the phone call, Colleen?
The phone call was on Thursday, and
Okay.
actually, I think Ruth got a call before we did. We know where we got the lungs, and we'll share that, at some point. We got the call to come in for lungs on Thursday afternoon late. We were going to meet Brian and Crystal, and in the middle of 5 o'clock traffic, got a call in the car, and the lady said, "I want to talk to you about some lungs." And Chip, we were just, we were floored. And, we always wondered, what's it going to feel like when we get the call? So we loaded up, we ran home, grabbed a bag, and got to the hospital. And then they told us the surgery would be the next morning. And it was actually at noon on that Friday, the 20th.
And did I hear correctly from someone, and you guys can just laugh at me if not, because I must have dreamed it, but was there a possibility scientifically that even with a match, there's a possibility that once the new lungs are put in place, it may not work, his body could still reject it? Was that in the realm of possibilities? Well, was it a high percentage chance? Like, what did they say? Like 20% chance, one, or?
They didn't give us any percentages, but that's one of the main concerns at this point is rejection or infection. That's on the table, but they are very pleased with how he's responding and how his lungs are functioning. And they said he's 100% what they would have hoped for post-op.
Yeah. Was it unnerving? Obviously, a lung transplant is such a huge deal, but was it like scary in a deeper way as far as that possibility? Or at this point, you guys just felt like God's hands all over this? Chip's, Dad's been saying everything's going to be okay, and now everything's happening. Was it still scary? Like, oh, I hope the surgery works?
It was for me. I know, as they're wheeling him off, there's that possibility. Mm-hmm. But we did feel very good about it. Mm-hmm. And we really, that was our only option. Yep. And so.
How about you, kiddos?
The chance that, I don't know how you worded it a second ago. Is there a scare of the chance that, as they're wheeling him back, things may not go right? Yeah. I'm a surrealist. Last time I checked, I read it at 8th grade reading level, so I wasn't able to process a lot of this very fast. But I was able to process it fast enough to know that there were some chances and not chances. But as much as I am a surrealist, I think I'm an optimist, and I did have faith, and I don't know, I just kind of operate off a feeling at that point, and I didn't feel like that was going to be the last time I was going to see him. I didn't feel like we had complications ahead. That doesn't mean it wasn't. That's just a feeling, but it's just how I operated through it. I told him I loved him and did all that I could and should do if it was, but I felt pretty confident that he'd be coming back out and be in a better spot. Granted, probably not immediately, but after some recovery, he'd be in a much better spot. So,
Ruth and Nicole,
I would agree with what he said. At that point when we, just seeing how everything had come together so intricately and so beautifully, I think at that point, I wasn't there when they wheeled him back. I landed, I don't know, an hour or so after he went into surgery. But by that time, I was pretty convinced and pretty confident that this was going to be a good thing, and that we were going to, see him on the healing side of things. Of course, the thought crosses your mind of, oh crap, if I said all I wanted to say in case it is. But at the same time, I felt like I would still have the opportunity.
I think that we were all kind of aligned on this, the way that things unfolded, the way that we got past the giant scare right there at the last minute, and then everything seemed to be, coming together. I think it's heavy to balance the other side of what a transplant means. And that was probably, that weighed on me more than the risk of the surgery in that moment, because I felt so confident Dad was going to be okay. At this point, that was what we'd been praying for, what he'd been believing would happen, and really calmly, I think, had us convinced too. So it wasn't as much a fear of the surgery as in those immediate moments. It was the processing, the whole counterbalance to what receiving that transplant means. It was hard. We were talking to our girls about it before leaving, and that was harder to talk about than Dad going under this really serious surgery. But they handled it well too. My youngest handled it so well. I had to tell her we don't want her rushing off to be an organ donor, because by the end of the conversation, she's like, I want to be an organ donor. All right, well, one day, but let's not rush.
Yeah. So, Nicole, the Googler, I think you're probably the person to ask, like, what scientifically can you give us any insight on why it's so physically traumatic? Or I don't want to put you on the spot, but did you read it? I want to get into the painful recovery and just the extent of it. So I know it was hard, but just how hard was that post recovery? What was his body trying to do?
To be honest, I didn't go into a lot of detail on
Mm-hmm.
what the surgery would entail. That's beyond my beyond my
Sure.
curiosity, to be honest. But it was clear that he was going to have a lot of rehab, a lot of pain. There's multiple ways for them to do the surgery and, affix things. And he definitely had the full cracking open, and those details are too much for me.
Yeah. How did he describe the pain, Colleen? Was it like just intense chest pain? I mean, just
Well, the first few days after surgery, yes, they had him heavily medicated and kept him sedated for the first 24 to 30 hours. But yeah, he would describe his pain on a level of 1 to 10. He was around 8, 9 even at times. It was just, I mean, they ripped his chest open, so he was in a lot of pain.
yeah. So let's get to marital honesty from the wife's perspective. Does he have a high or low pain tolerance in general? Because I have a very, very low pain tolerance.
Well, it's lower than mom's, who's like walked around with broken things. I'm like, it's fine. Yeah, it looks broken. It'll be fine.
Yeah, I would say low to mid.
Yeah.
Tolerance.
Yeah. I would love to know, and there's probably research out there, but I think women's pain tolerance is just higher. I don't know. I just think, and maybe it's built in because of giving birth. I don't know. But Priscilla's pain tolerance is way higher than mine. I'm a little wimp, like when I get a cold. How was it seeing your dad suffer, just honestly, physically? Because you guys were happy. He was happy. You guys are in a celebratory mindset, I would imagine. Did the seeing him go through so much pain put like a damper on the celebratory aspect?
Well, he reminded us several times that while we were celebrating, he wasn't quite to that stage yet.
Oh, that's helpful. Yeah. Yeah.
That's true.
Were y'all trying to make jokes and everything? And he's just like, I'm not ready for jokes.
Yeah,
for sure.
I mean, seeing him go from kind of the go-to guy, we all go to him for things, to see him kind of become very vulnerable. It's hard, but also, that first, 48 hours of him being sedated, when he came out of that and seeing him just writhing in pain, it was really hard. But then to see every day he start to get better and start to improve. And as we were laughing several times, he definitely reminded us that he was the one on the table. But I'm glad he's definitely feeling differently now. He's feeling better. So that's good.
Yeah.
He was in and out of sleep a lot the whole time, and we would just go about talking and carrying on between ourselves, usually violating the visitor policy. He would wake up out of his, multi-hour in and out, and sometimes chime into the conversation, and we're like, "Did you hear all that?" He's like, "I'm not unconscious. I'm here.
I'm not in a coma. It's post-surgery." This will be honestly the first time the general public has a more involved explanation of how he's doing right now. And so this is Wednesday, January the 22nd, depending on when people are listening. But how is he doing currently? I heard him messing with me. I didn't see him, but he sounded like normal. Like for me, his voice sounded exactly how it normally sounds. So how's he doing right now?
He's doing really well. He's doing, and the doctors obviously feel like he's doing better than he feels like he's doing on certain days. It seems like once he has a long day and a hard day, because we are still in clinic and doing tests and x-rays and rehab Monday through Friday. And so once he's had a hard day, the next day sometimes is a little rough and he just feels weak. He feels washed out, but then he'll get rested and then he'll have a great couple of days that are really strong.
Yeah. So what is his immediate and long-term future look like? So what are they saying the rest of the recovery is? I've got tons of questions, so I can remind you of some of these, but is there ever a point where he is 100% like back to where he was before he had the lung disease? I mean, what is his long-term life expectancy? All of that.
Well, to get back to what we would call normal, Joey, it's going to be close to a year, basically, before he can resume, all of his activities. They remind him constantly that infection and rejection are some of the biggest concerns. And plus he's lost a lot of weight and they're concerned about that. They just want him to eat and put weight on. And some of the medicines have side effects that have thrown him into like a diabetic state. So he's got plenty on the table that he's dealing with right now. But they said to give himself up to a year before he really feels back to his normal self.
I'd argue that you might not get the normality of Chi Chi back. It may be a super or abnormal. As I was having a little sit down convo, and I got wind that maybe he wanted a golf cart for the island whenever they got done to help move around and not have to walk everywhere. And I mean, it sounded like a great idea. And he looked at me and was like, What's the point of a golf cart? Then I'm not moving. I'm not working out. I'm not using my body." I'm like, "Okay, sorry, misunderstood whatever somebody said." He said, "I just assumed get a jet ski before I get a golf cart." I was like, "What?"
He is looking forward to that.
And he was serious. He said, "I'd like to get a jet ski so we can go out on that." And he just kind of made a comment of some intentionality of having fun and using what he's been given. So I think super or abnormal's probably what we're going to get, not the normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Might see him on a cheetah print jet ski with a purple life jacket here soon.
That's right. Oh my gosh.
I got a couple more questions for y'all. And it's okay if y'all do a lot of yeah, I totally agree with what he said or she said. But what are you most proud of when it comes to seeing your husband or your dad and how he's walked this journey out? And maybe what have you learned from him, seeing him, go through this?
I'm going to jump in. And I, without a doubt, would say that his steadfastness, his ability to hear from God and remain unwavering and confident that God told him it's going to be okay. Even though he's been the one experiencing the physical part of this, he's been the grounding one, especially in my life. I'm the hand wringer. And like I said, I prayed prayers of faith, but also begging prayers of desperation. And I'm just so proud of his ability to hear God and stand firm in what he's heard.
I mean, I think the cliche answer is, of course, coming out of it is it was a Christmas miracle, right? It was a miracle, period. It was at Christmas. Miracles can happen. But I'll go a little deeper, and I can't remember the gentleman's name. We were at service. Ruth, you were there. We were at the Johns Island campus, and first name, last name, synonymity. He was telling us a story about how an accident happened in front of his house, or walking his kids to the bus stop or something like that, and there was an apparent death there. Lost him. He didn't pray for the guy. God told the preacher that was telling the story. He asked him, "Why didn't you pray for him?" He said, "Well, the guy's dead." And he made a comment as to if you pray, as far as prayer working, like if you don't pray for him to be revived or to live or to whatever, then if you're not going to pray, you don't believe. And after listening to that and how I kind of correlated that back to a lot of close friends who, when all of this news broke, they pulled over on the side of the road or called me or just life-stopping things to call me and pray. I pair that with that story, and that's what I take out of all of it is that prayer works. And if nobody would have prayed, or if one person would have prayed, we might not have the result that we have. But because of his support and all that we have to be thankful for, all the prayers that came through, that's the biggest thing that I take away from. If you don't pray, then maybe you don't believe that thing to be true or believe that thing to come to fruition. So I am appreciative for all of those. As I said, my own as well.
Yep.
Yeah, there's lots of people that love Dad and reached out to us, reached out to him. I mean, the community that we've gotten to see is just such a testament to how many people he's touched and affected. But as many people as love Dad, like I loved in the hospital, there were multiple times that this happened to, and I just love lots of nurses and techs come in and out, and Dad's barely conscious half the time, really. But he would just observe people and comment sometimes on people and little observations that he'd make about them and what he, connections he'd make with the people who were taking care of him. It's really special to see. And I feel really privileged that our dad's like that. He's always been interested in all the people, regardless of what they're doing, who they are, what role they're playing in the surroundings, and I just love to get to see that, even at his weakest point.
Yeah, I remember him saying in a conversation I had with him on podcast, and I was like, wow, that, just struck a chord with me. But he basically said, what more motivation does anyone need to, do good work? And for him, it's, counseling and walking through people. He's like, as long as there's pain in this world, like what other motivation do you need? That sounds a lot like what you're saying. Those are
Yeah.
real people with real things going on in their life, and he can't help but to care.
It's very cool to see. He can't turn it off.
Yeah. Yeah.
He knows how to strike the chords.
What are we? And by the way, brother, that was Morris Morrison that was speaking when we were at Johns Island. He gave a shout out to Dad.
Shout out, Morris Morrison. Sorry.
I think what I'm most proud of is seeing him, of course, his unwavering, like Mom said, his steadfastness and his just confidence in what God was saying to him and how God was showing up for him. But I think even leading up to the surgery and just after the surgery, I think his willingness to be a little more vulnerable and his, like I said before, he's our go-to guy. He's everybody's go-to guy. But he's kind of, like Mom said, he's the grounding one. And so when, we're all losing our mess, like what happens when he's knocked out, but, just to be able to see him be a little bit more vulnerable and open with, what he's really experiencing, what he's really feeling, and how he's really, the high points and the not so high points. Like, yes, this is a miracle. And yes, this is like a mind blowing experience. And that's for us watching it, not, for him, it's a whole other story, but, just letting us into to kind of the depths of how he's feeling and thinking has meant a lot to me.
Yeah. It's interesting because one, I don't remember if it was Nicole or Ruth, but one of you mentioned earlier on in the conversation of how he, said, don't look it up. Almost like early on it was, hey, if I can shield my kids from this, I will. But then
I don't remember hearing that, for the record, but
yeah,
I would have ignored it.
yeah. But the post surgery, you can see him, so it's like I can't hide this, All right. Well, the last question that I wanted to ask, and I'll let Chip next week actually tell people a little bit or a lot of the background of the person who lost their life, for Chip to have those lungs. But I'm just curious, and y'all are in the middle of a lot of emotions, a really, really big deal that has happened to your dad. So I don't think anybody would look down their noses at you guys if any of y'all didn't put a lot of thought into this at this juncture. But, here we are, January 22nd. So we're about a month into the recovery. Is this something that you guys think about, like, or when you're around him and he's breathing, do you think, man, that's a person's lungs that they were alive just a month and a half ago? Like, is it something that's in your mind or not so much right now?
For me, it's still at that stage where it's relatively automatic. When I get into this reflection of gratitude, it's very hard not to also go to that place of grief for this other family. And I've thought several times about their perspective, and I would never want anyone to think that, if we had the choice, I don't want it to be like we've stolen time from another family and another husband, father, all of that. It was such a blessing that I was delayed coming back. I couldn't get a flight the day that we found out he was having a surgery. I got stuck in Paris. And then when I did get on the flight, I got to sit with this girl. Her name's Kate. I didn't ask her if I could say the whole name, so I won't. But turns out her dad's a pastor as well of another non-denominational church out in the Midwest. And so we bonded over that. And then she shared that she was an anesthesiologist trainee and finishing up her certifications and had just done a rotation through the NICU where families had to make the decision to do organ donors, put their children's organs up for donor. And she shared some stories with me of the other side of it. And it was so heartbreaking, but so amazing to hear the experience, what it means for the other families to be able to know that it's not all for nothing, that there is something coming out of this tremendous loss. And so I'm holding on to that. But of course, it's not a choice you would ever make to take that from someone else for your benefit. As much as, we're super grateful, and I'm so glad that we're in the position we are.
Mm-hmm.
It's after someone else's loss.
I saw on Instagram, so obviously I don't know how real it was, but it looked legit, and it was a father hearing his daughter's heartbeat in someone else's body for the first time. I was like, I can't take that. I mean, it's a dad of the daughter. I was like, I can't watch this.
It's amazing.
Man, I appreciate you sharing that perspective, Nicole. Anybody else want to extend that part of the conversation or say anything that you weren't able to say thus far? Because we're kind of wrapping things up.
Well, for that, Joey, I think like Chip and I were praying before this all happened. He was on the transplant list, and it just broke me when we were praying one morning that somebody has to die for you to live. And I asked him, I said, what do we do with that? Because somebody's going to have to die. And he just said, that's above our pay grade. And he said, we're just going to continue to pray that God provides lungs, but that's not our job to figure that out. Especially the way it happened, our hearts go out to this donor family. And so we just for months, had been praying for the donor and their family that, through this whole process. So it's been surreal in that. And yes, we do think a lot about that. It was a gift, but it was so awakening that as they were taking Chip to surgery, the nurse stopped and said, have you listened to your to your lungs? And we said, no, neither one of us have. And she gave us her stethoscope, and we listened to Chip's lungs and their disease state. And the next morning, when they allowed me to go in to see him, she said, would you like to hear his new lungs? And I said, yes, I would. And the difference was indescribable, just so clear. And it just made the gift even more real to be able to hear that. And just so grateful.
The only thing I can really add to that is, do we think about them? Yes, all the time. And I think everybody's kind of said that there are no words to express the gratitude, the goodness, and hopefully one day we can, see them and say that to them and share a moment with them. But I mean, it's definitely not a question of do we ever think about them. It's, how often we do and just how indebted we feel to them.
That'll be one crazy hangout in heaven if it doesn't happen on this earth. You know what I'm saying? Like just all of us completely redeemed, completely happy and joyous, and then reflecting on, wow, if it wasn't for you, he wouldn't have gotten more, it's just, and we'll all be happy about it on both sides of the coin. Be a great day. Yeah. Well, I really enjoyed just getting to have some FaceTime with Ruth, Nicole, and Brian. Never had met you guys. I've heard about you a lot. And I tell my kids that Chip's like a additional father in me and your mom's life. And that's, I'm sure tons of people say that. And we're just one of many. But
we hear a lot about you too, Joey.
Well, that's cool. That's cool.
Yes, I do.
Well, thank y'all for your time, and people are going to enjoy hearing from Chip's family.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joey.
For sure.
Thanks, brother.
All right, y'all have any questions for me? We'll just rock and roll because I want some of the chit chat to be recorded. But
I know I'm nervous.
I am too.
Are y'all nervous?
You should be nervous, Joey. Yeah. Brian? No.
I'm not nervous.
I know you're not.
Well, I'll throw this out there that this is Chip's podcast and Chip's not here. So what I believe about the Bible and marriage, that means Colleen's in charge. So Colleen, take it away.
Oh.
Oh, whoa,
Colleen's
whoa,
like,
whoa.
no.